resume. Oops, let's,
because I'm looking at, okay, there we go. Okay, well, everyone, thank you for coming and joining us early, I should say this morning on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. and everybody's awake. It's a beautiful day out here today. So I know you guys are excited to listen to this presentation and get outside and get into your garden and start planting your tomatoes. So first of all, my name is Melody Knox and I'm one of the UCCE Master Gardeners. And I'm here along with Lisa Lamone, who's also with the Western Municipal Water District. And so we're here to talk to you today about the tomatoes and good soil. So I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. First of all, our speaker today is going to be Thurman Howard. He's also a UCC Master Gardener. And what I want to first get established is that he's going to go through his presentation, and what's going to happen is he's going to get to a certain point and then he's going to ask for questions. So if you guys could all be so kind and place all of your questions into the chat box, and then I'll be sure to make sure that we do cover those. So first of all, I'd like to tell you that as UCC Master Gardeners, or the Master Gardener program of Riverside County, what we do is we make sure that we share our information, which is research-based information, with the community throughout Riverside County. We are trained volunteers, and we offer research-based information. And we advise the public on gardening and horticulture. We also have our information tables all through Riverside County. You probably see us at certain markets. For example, you probably see us at farmers markets in Riverside, County Corona, Temecula, Vale and the Promenade, Moreno Valley, Marietta, and downtown Riverside. So if you're going to be in a desert area, please look for us at the farmers markets in Palm Springs or La Quinta. Next month, we also have another workshop coming up on May 8th. And as well as you can check the VMS, this is for our Master Gardener people who are here today. And then for the other people who follow WELS, W-E-L, please check their website, the Western Municipal Water District, and you'll be able to see our other upcoming workshops. So on May 8th, we're going to have a guest speaker, Becky Levers, and she's going to be talking about native landscapes of color, safety, and water efficiency. So please submit your questions through that chat feature and we will submit them to the speakers. We will also post resources such as Master Gardener Helpline in the chat specific challenge, or in the chat for specific challenges that you may face in your garden. So with all of that being said, let me go ahead and introduce to you our speaker, our wonderful speaker, Thurman Howard, which Thurman is one of our Master Gardeners, and he has over 10,000 hours doing some of everything. And I refer to him as the Thurman, but he has been a Master Gardener since he entered into the training class in 2014. And he received his certification, of course, in 2015. In those 8 years, Thurman has encompassed the very spirit of the Master Gardener program. His participation in existing programs and the creation of new programs have helped to grow our community. So Thurman is very loyal to the soil and takes great pride in understanding its composition. Tomatoes have always been a fruit that he enjoys growing and is a student of its challenges. So living in an unincorporated section of Riverside County above Cherry Valley, Thurman lives with his wife, Marilyn, and their 2 dogs and 50 trillion microorganisms. So before we get any further into this, like I said, Thurman's an expert. He has 10,000 hours just dealing with the Master Gardener program. This is like one of his fields of expertise. So please sit back and listen. And you have an excellent speaker here to go ahead and tell you about soil health and tomatoes. So Thurman, are you ready? I know he has his music. Thurman, can you turn your music up a little bit louder? Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the WMWD workshop, Soil Health and Happy Tomatoes. You know, I tell a story about the 10,000 hours. Several years ago, Cindy Peterson got her 5,000 hours, and I was so impressed by that. And then I looked on the program, And there was a gal that had 10,000 hours. And I turned to Rosa and I said, boy, that lady needs a life. So here I am in the 10,000 order category. It's been a wonderful ride because I surrounded myself with very dedicated and loyal and wonderful master gardeners. So I want to kick this thing off. I'm very excited to be here. WMWD has been a great partner of our Master Gardener program.
Thank you, Thurman.
If you've never bitten into a fragrant, vine-ripened, sun-warmed tomato harvested from your own garden, you haven't tasted a real tomato. I can contest to that, and so can my fellow master gardeners. These are the words that I live by. I started growing tomatoes about 10, 15 years ago. And I got new lenses when I became a master gardener. And I started to look at planting tomatoes differently. It sounds pessimistic, but expecting tomato trouble is the best defense. We don't think about tomato problems until fruit are rotten and leaves are yellow, curled, and ugly. Then we question the cause and ponder the remedy. Let's prepare a plan of preventing as many problems as we can. Hello again. My name is Thurman Howard, University of California Master Gardener of Riverside County. I have some talking points here, not in necessarily in this order, but I'm going to bring up sanitation and quarantine. We're going to talk about prepping our soil. I'm going to help a lot of you who are new to the tomato plant, how to decide on what type of plant to get for you. And we're going to go over potential problems. Tomatoes are long season, heat-loving plants. Will not tolerate frost. And there's about 10,000 different varieties. They're grown all over the world. And over 170 million tons grow worldwide. Could you imagine Italian cuisine without tomatoes? So the types of tomato plants, we have our determinate, our indeterminate. We have heirlooms and hybrids. Our determinate bush will set fruit at the top of the plant, and it takes about 70 days for it to fruit from the time of planting. Varieties of tomatoes that grow to a compact height of 3 to 4 feet. They all ripen at approximately within the same time, 1 to 2 weeks. I've had these plants last a lot longer, and I had to take them out of my garden because they wouldn't quit producing fruit. They're good for canning and making sauces. The picture to my right are tomatoes that we've harvested about every 3 days. So they're very great to have, especially if you're canning and making sauces. It's not recommended that you have to prune these, but I do. I'd like for you to at least take the bottom leaves that are touching the ground, take them off. I know you only have them for 70 days, but you want to practice that keeping the soil and moisture off of your leaves. And they also come in a hybrid and heirloom varieties. Your indeterminate vine, fruit set all along the vine, they can reach heights of up to 12 feet, although a 6-foot is normal. Indeterminates will bloom and ripen fruit until it frosts. They can come in heirloom and hybrids. Pruning is an option. I recommend that we do prune this particular indeterminate vine. I want to talk at this juncture about your suckers that are on your indeterminates. You want to pinch off or use a pruner. Now, these suckers are usually found in between the stems. Suckers are good for starters. If you want to pinch off a sucker and stick it in a pot with soil and water it, the chances of it rooting is very good. And this is a good thing to, hand out to your children, maybe start their garden with it. They will fruit, but they don't have a taproot. So their root structure is not going to be that strong. You want to look for suckers throughout the tree when they're small, but as they get larger, you want to make sure that the suckers below your fruit set is pinched off. The reason for this is you want as much nutrients applying to the fruit. Sometimes suckers can come in handy to add shade to your fruit. Now, these suckers are very strong. So if they're on the top of your canopy, they provide food, they provide a lot of energy to the plant, and they also provide shade for some of your tomatoes, especially at the higher end of the canopy. When you're touching a plant, a tomato plant, and you're pinching off the suckers, and you've got it all cleaned up, make sure you sanitize your hands before you go on to the next plant. This is a very good practice to have in your garden. Let's talk a little bit about the heirloom cultivar. They have a very short or shelf life, and they're very disease resistant, less disease resistant. They have a lot of historical interest. They give access to wider varieties, and they appeal to those who wish to save seeds. Heirlooms have a spectacular taste. One thing about heirlooms, when we moved from Altaloma up here towards Cherry Valley, the heirlooms that I grew so well in Altaloma did not do well here at all. So what I did was I checked around the neighborhood and found really friendly neighbors who grew tomatoes, and they gave me a lot of the heirlooms that do well here. So if you're moving into a new area, or if you want to start planting heirlooms in your area, check with your neighbors, see what they're planting, and maybe they'll give you some seeds. A hybrid tomato, people, the master gardeners who know me, know that I can get cocky at sometimes. And I was cocky at the fact that I wasn't going to grow hybrids because I'm an heirloom kind of guy. But over time and understanding more, I decided that, you know what, hybrids are good. They are a sterile seed or do not reproduce true to the parent plant. So this is something that you really shouldn't try to start from seed. There's a combination of two different varieties. beneficial traits of each parent. Benefits of hybrid tomatoes: improve disease resistance, which is very important. High quality fruit, which I've experienced. A specific growth habit, which is good. And it has a very high yield. So Melanie, do we have any questions?
No, not as of yet, Thurman.
Oh, I must be doing a good job then, huh?
I think so, or people here are doing something else.
All right. Good. Okay, moving along.
Okay.
So let's get started. Soil prep. I start prepping my soil for my spring garden in the fall. I use either chicken manure compost, steer manure, or steer manure compost. I like to start by clearing off my garden. I take into consideration what was growing in my garden. Was it a heavy feeder or was it a light feeder? If it was a heavy feeder, I would apply my chicken manure. The first step I would do is I would rake the soil down to about an inch, inch and a half, maybe even 2 inches. And then I would apply the manure directly on top of it. I do not till it into the soil. I do not mix it into the soil. What I'm trying to do here is I'm creating a tea bag. As I water that garden, the water will create a tea that will slowly percolate into the soil. And as it percolates into the soil, it'll be feeding my soil, feeding my microbes. As the soil is fed, during that time in September, it's still warm and the community is still active. But then as the season turns and it gets colder, activity will slow down, depending, of course, where you live. Where I live, it slows down because I get below freezing. But in the Riverside proper, you might have much more activity throughout the winter months. I call this resting the soil using the compost and manure. And I water to encourage my microbes to start growing. Now, the steer manure can also be used, or the steer manure compost. And a lot of times I will prep a garden starting in December. And when I do that, I do the same procedure with the chicken manure, but adding the steer manure. And sometimes the steer manure is not as strong as the chicken manure. About a month or two, about 2 months into this, I start adding bone meal. Bone meal has calcium and magnesium. And this is something that I want to incorporate now. I want to break it down. I want to break it into the soil. And then I water when needed. I want to make sure that I'm getting moisture into the soil, and I pray for rain. These are what's happening in the garden, breaking down your soil, or what I call making soil. These are little critters that are just hatched, and they're working the soil. And as the heat starts to grow, they really get active. Now, what you see them going after are tiny little things that you might find in your manures, tiny little particles, and they're going after it. And what they're doing is they're digesting it and they're pooping it out. And there are things that we can't even see that are eating the byproduct of the worms and these small little microorganisms. And so it's a chain of breaking down your soil. Pretty cool, huh? So over that time period, we want to have this type of texture in our soil, a rich, rich environment. Now, this gentleman here who has the soil in his hand is probably holding more microorganisms in his hand than there are people walking this planet. About a month away or a month and a half away from planting, I start to add a lower nitrogen content and a higher phosphorus and potassium mixture. You can use any type of fertilizer you like, as long as it's a 3-12-12. What this is going to do is going to break down to a 1-4-4 over time, just about the time it's ready to be brought up by your plants. All right, spring is in the air. I'm getting excited. My worms and microbes, organisms are breaking the soil down. It's warming up. And now it's time for me to go to work. So like most gardeners, we have our workshops in our yard or near our garden. And this is when I start to sanitize my work area. I usually sanitize my work area twice a year, closer to March, April, and June and July. I want to sanitize my pots, my cages, or other support items that's going to touch my plants or my tomato plants. What I normally do is I get a trash can that's not leaking. I fill it up with about 3/4 water, and I add bleach, and I go by smell. When I can smell it, it's enough, and that's how I clean it. So it's approximately 9 parts water to 1 part bleach. Another part of sanitizing is when your crop is over from the previous year, you want to remove all of the tomato plants when the season is over. And do not place it in your compost. You want to make sure that you sanitize your tools and your hands when you're touching your plants. As I mentioned earlier when we talked about the suckers. And these 2 handy wipes are all over my garden. They're there because sometimes I lose them, I can't find them, so I get another one. But I usually stick a couple in my pocket so that I keep sanitizing my hands while I touch my fruit. This is a practice that I do. I'm not saying that you have to do it. But anytime I bring a plant home, either from the nursery, or if somebody is kind enough to give me a plant, neighbor or friend, I put it into a quarantine station. I leave it there for about 7 to 10 days before entering it into my garden. During this period, I'm looking for chew marks and I'm checking for pests under the leaves. A lot of times, the plant will start to stress. And usually it's because of root bound. So if you see that stressing, repot and put it back in quarantine. You shouldn't have any flowers on any of your tomato plants at this stage. If you do, pick them off. As I'm getting ready to plant my tomatoes into the ground, I like to have fish kelp solution available, bone meal available, and Epsom salts available. If you have worm castings, that's a great thing to apply to your garden, especially if you're getting them fresh, because fresh worm castings will have worm eggs in there, and it's just going to add more red wigglers into your garden. I'm going to pick on the indeterminates on their growing stages because your determinants have a short growing span. Now, a lot of people will go to the nursery and they want to buy their plant and they want to take it straight to the garden, put it in the ground. That is a practice that I don't do. However, if you want to do this, look for a strong, green, healthy stem. Right here, you can see it. If planting in the ground, right away, select a tall seedling. You may want to pinch the lower leaves off of here before putting it into the ground. Make sure that there are no chew marks beneath the leaves or on the leaves. Check the roots. Pull them out of the, even if you're at the retail store, yank it out, check the roots, make sure they're white and healthy. Pick tall plants, not leggy plants. There's a difference. With no flowers. If you're at a retail store and you see a nice tall plant with a whole bunch of flowers on it, and you must have it, buy it, make sure you pinch those flowers off and add some nutrients to it because it's stressing. You want to look for a plant that's proportionate to the pot size. If you have a 4-inch wide pot, the plant shouldn't be more than 12 inches. And if you have an 8-inch wide pot, no more than 12 to 18 inches. At this juncture, I'm really focusing on roots. That's my main focus right now. I do not grab a plant from the nursery and take it straight to my bed. I transplant them at least 2 to 3 times. This is something that I've been practicing for a long time. I use the soil from my garden as repotting soil. I want to introduce the soil in my garden to my plants when I bring them home. So I start to pot them with that. Each time you plant, trim the bottom leaves. Again, you don't want the leaves touching the soil or water. Roots can grow at a rate of 1 inch a day. Transplant when roots are showing at the bottom of the pot. When I pick up my plant and I look at the bottom, if I see the stringy roots starting to come out, I know right then and there I'm about a week away of repotting again. While in the pot, I submerge these into a 5-gallon bucket of water. I do this for a reason I'll explain as I go along. But once a week, I try to water this about every other day, but once a week in my watering cycle, I like to add some fish and kelp solution. The reason for that is when you dip your pot into the 5-gallon bucket and lift it up, you'll see a lot of the water changing its color. A lot of the nutrients are flushing out. So about once a week, you want to add this back into that pot so that you have a good nutrient base still there. And I'm always checking when you transplant, make sure your roots are nice and white, and that tells you they're happy. Another reason I like to keep my tomatoes in pots is I like to move them around in case of frost. I like to harden them. I will take them out on excursions. I'll put them under a tree. They'll get 1 or 2 hours of indirect light. And then I slowly introduce them to the harder light system as the plant gets larger, just prior to putting them into the garden. So make sure your new pots have been sterilized, that you're going to transplant your tomatoes into. Irrigate with a 5-gallon bucket and your plant. I stick the whole plant in the bucket, raise it up. It's going to bubble. Then I raise it up, make sure all the bubbles are gone, airtight, bring it up. And then I've been practicing this for a long time and I didn't know I was doing something right. Pour the leftover water into your tomato beds. And I normally look for little suckers, and while I'm doing this, and I pinch them off and I just throw them in the bucket. And again, I'll reiterate, once a week, you want to add a fish and kelp solution to your watering practices. When I repot, I don't do this. I don't stick the plant all the way at the bottom of the pot. I want to take advantage of the taproot. The taproot is a very aggressive root. So I want to bring it up. I want it to have space to move. I don't want to smother it. We are still focusing on roots. You have 2 types of roots. You have a taproot that is very aggressive, and it's creating like a tree beneath the ground, and it's sending tributaries out throughout the soil. And then you have your fibrous roots that bring in nutrients, and the fibrous roots are found all up and down your tomato plant through the hairs that you see growing off of the stems. You want to create root pressure. Now, the picture that I have, the upper picture that I have, is something that I did 3 or 4 years ago. I had an exceptionally large plant that was doing very well. And I wanted to take this picture to show you that when I finally put my plant into my garden, I'm going to plant it deep, okay? Because I don't have a pot there that's going to mess up with my taproot. My practice is I stop watering my tomato plant that's in the pot for about 3 days. I stop it from watering, but I start watering my garden heavily. I want it really moist. And the reason for this is when I finally put my thirsty tomato plant into an oasis of water and nutrition, my roots will grab on or gravitate to it. And then what I do is I pinch off all of the leaves that are towards the canopy and pretty much cover most of it, because all of these will turn into roots. About a week after I put this in the ground, remember that there are still a lot of root fibers that are young and they're struggling. So I add fish and kelp solution to it just to help feed them and let it percolate into the soil. I continue to keep the flowers off the plant at this stage. Keep suckers from forming, always. If you can see the picture of this, you have now a strong root system. It's still growing. You have a plant that's taking off, and this is exactly where we want to be. Any questions, Melanie?
soon as I can unmute, right, and tell you, yes, some people have woke up out there. They must have heard me talking about them. So we have plenty of questions in here for you, Thurman.
Uh-oh.
But one of the questions which I've already answered, and I'm going to just go over it again, it says, are the slides available? Now this presentation is being recorded. So for the Master Gardeners, it will be on VMS. And then for those of you who have gone through Western Municipal Water District, it's going to be on their website as well. So this whole presentation will be up there along with the slides. But for the first question, this is from Laura. She says, are hybrids genetically modified?
Not really. No, it's not. It's not a GMO.
Okay. Then we had a question from Patricia. And actually, there's two questions regarding Coachella Valley, but she says, hi, Thurman, what advice for growing tomatoes in Coachella Valley do you have?
Well, you know, it's a different season. You have a different season there. Same procedure, but you're not going to start it in the springtime like we do. You have a great tomato season down there. I'm not quite sure of when, but I would think that just as it starts to, the heat starts to wind down, it's a little different because you have the heat. You're not worried about the frost. So you can plant them a little earlier and make sure that they're hydrated. I would say, again, when your temperatures are in the 90s, I would start putting them in the ground, and you'll have a nice growth spurt. And one great thing about that is you don't have to worry about frost.
Okay, and pretty much that goes along with the answer, Barry Mantrell had this question, but Barry, I think that he covered the question because he was saying, how does the process vary for growing in the Coachella Valley? So I think with what you just said, Thurman, that is covered.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. And again, I would like to do a study on that. I think it's great questions because we do have two different seasons. Just to add that in June, when it's hot, I start planting for my winter tomato plants, and they shoot up quickly because I'm not worried about it. No frost, so I start them early, and I get a better fruit production just like say in September, October, just before the frost hits. So I would imagine that I would follow the temperature, would get your seedlings in when it's around 90 down there in the Coachella Valley, and take advantage of the heat and take advantage of no worries, man, no frost.
Okay. Okay, so the next question comes from Marcel. She wants to know, what is the meaning of theater? A theater.
A feeder is like something like that if you're growing corn in that in your bed or in that area, it's a heavy feeder. It takes a lot of nutrients out of your soil. And then you have things like if you're growing squash or lettuce and things like that, they're light feeders. They don't extract as much nutrients out of the soil.
Okay. Have another question, comment and a question from Deb. She said, I pulled out my tomatoes last September, and since it was warm, I replanted tomatoes in the same raised bed, but I'm getting tomatoes now, but have red spider mites. I put rubbing alcohol on them a few weeks ago, but they are back. She says, what can I do other than pull these tomato plants?
Pull them out. Get rid of them.
Okay. So it looks like there's no option but to get rid of them. All right.
Yeah, just get rid of them. I don't like, I'm going to talk about spider mites later. I don't like them. I clip them off. I cut them away. I don't put any alcohol. I just cut away the stem. Get rid of it, bag it up, throw it away. If they persist, pull it out and get rid of the plant. You do not want those items there. But I will be talking about that a little later, and then maybe I can answer some of the questions then.
Okay, because I do have some more. Do you want to go through the rest of them, or you?
Let's go for it. But that's why we're here.
Okay. So I have another question from Laura. So how can you tell if the tomatoes in determinate or indeterminate?
Well, when you buy it, you're looking for, it tells you whether it's a determinate or indeterminate. And as I mentioned, a determinate tomato will only grow 4 feet. It's a bush tomato. from a seedlings standpoint, if somebody would walk up to me and says, is this a determinate or indeterminate? I couldn't tell. So when you're buying it from a reputable nursery, or if you're getting it from, if it's an heirloom that's given to you by your neighbor or friend, ask them, what kind of tomato is it? If they say it's aroma, you got to determine determinate tomato. So that's a tough question. But certain varieties, if you know what the variety is, will distinguish what they are.
Okay, so another question, is it too late in the season to start a new garden bed?
No.
Okay,
But what I would do, instead of putting the manure on the bed right now, I would create a manure tea. And I would get a pump. I would get some, that white cloth, aerated cloth, and I would put the manure in there, put it in a 5-gallon bucket or a 55-gallon drum, hang it in there, turn the aerator on, and make a tea. Then take the tea and add it to your garden as you're planting, and keep feeding the tea. That should give you a good head start. It's not too late. We did that at the Saboba Indian reservations, where our nitrogen level had dropped because of a heavy feeder. And all we did was we created tea. We didn't have time to do it naturally, so we created our own tea, and it worked out very well.
okay, so one more question, Thurman, and then we're going to go ahead and keep pressing forward. So what type of tomato may produce the best in high altitude, i.e. like Lake Arrowhead?
I don't know that question. I would refer maybe to the Master Gardener program in San Bernardino that could ask that question. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, well, that's it for now. And again, thank you everybody for the questions. Keep them coming. But all right, Thurman, carry on.
Okay. I forgot where I was at. Okay, now let's go to watering. Okay, now you're looking at a raised bed that I have, and I like to water with a soaker hose or a drip system. And there's a reason for that as I go along. You notice I have a little thing in the middle there. That's my moisture meter. Every master gardener, or every gardener for that matter, should have one of these. These are really good. I'm getting ready now to prep my garden. I got my soaker hose in there. I'm watering it through that. And let me not get ahead of myself here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a splash zone. This is going to be a very important thing too. But before I do this, my 3-12-12 fertilizer, I'm going to throw a little bit more on there. I want you to remember that your roots will take up what it needs. Just make sure you have it there when it needs it, if that makes sense. Right now, we're creating a department store that has everything that a tomato plant could want. So I'm going to be adding some phosphorus, some low nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus onto the garden. And then I'm going to create my splash zone, which I'm going to show you in a few slides. It's very important to keep the water and soil off your tomato plant. That's hence the splash zone. Prevent spores from attaching to your plant. Prevent spore, yeah. Spores are going to attach to your plant whether you like it or not. But if you can keep the water off of it, it cannot activate. Notice I kept space between the gardens. Can you see the pictures down below? I don't have all my tomatoes all together. I have them spaced out. I have them anywhere from 4 to 6 in one bed. Then I have 2 to 3 in another bed. And I just spread them out for practicing in case I have a pathogen infiltrate my garden. At least I'll have tomatoes to last me the year. Field capacity. Field capacity is where you want to be and the gradient spectrum of watering. If you look on the chart, you have saturation, too much water. Too much water will cut back on the oxygen that your plants need. And then you have your wilt section where you have no water at all. That's not good. So you have one extreme to the other. You want to be right in the middle, and it's called field capacity. Now, let me see. You want to maintain a moist soil. When you use your moisture meter, you want to go into two zones. You want to bring that thermometer all the way to the bottom, to the deepest point, and you want to raise it up halfway through. That's going to be your root zone. So you want to make sure that your moisture is correct there. You want it at a moist state. When you use your moisture meter, touch the soil with your hands and get a feel for what moist feels like. And that way it's going to speed up the process. When you're walking around your garden, you're touching your soil, and you can tell more or less if your hydration schedule is correct or it's moving along fine. Look at your tomato plants in the morning. I look fresh in the morning, but when I come home after working an information table at the farmer's market, I can look a little ragged. It doesn't mean that I'm not okay, but next morning I'm fresh again. So when you're walking up to your plant, look at them in the morning. If you go in the afternoon and you think they're stressing because they look wilty, and first thing you're going to do is you're going to water it. And what you're causing is saturation. You're adding more water than it really needs. Okay, so look at your plant in the morning. If it doesn't look good in the morning, maybe you'll have to adjust your irrigation system to add more water. Field capacity is a benefit for your plant and all the microbes and worms that are in your garden. This will also help. I'm not saying it's going to guarantee, but it's going to help your fruit from splitting. Stay ahead of the high heat. When you know that you're going to have a heat wave coming in, 3 to 5 days, and if long if you can, start to adjust your hydration. This is critical. Go to your garden, feel the soil, add more water if needed, and keep your plant hydrated. Remember, the hydration of your plant takes time. We're talking about real slow processing. So by keeping ahead of it 3 to 5 days before that, the peak of the heat, you'll do just fine. A lot of my neighbors will come around and say, "Hey, Thurman, how come your trees are doing well? How come you don't have the dead stuff that we have?" Well, my plants do stress during a high heat, but not as bad as if you neglect that. Hydrating the day before expected heat is too late. Here's the splash zone that I was speaking of earlier. I have my drip system under here. I have some fertilizer added to it for potassium and my phosphate, and I have a splash zone. And my main objective here is to keep water off of my tomato plants. When I put these plants in, it only took about a week for it to explode. And it just came straight up. And they're healthy. My root systems were working. My plants were taking up nutrients. And notice, I don't have any flowers. Oh, maybe 1 or 2 on my vines, but that's okay. I'm good. And again, it's important to have the phosphorus and the potash in the soil because it's going to help the bloom. We're going to encourage the bloom. And like I said, the roots will take up what it needs when it needs us. We just have to make sure it's there. So here's my vines. Healthy vines, strong. What more can I say? The roots are working, the vines are working. What we're doing is we've created a freeway for our the xylem, the phloem, and the cambium. They're healthy. They're moving things around. We're getting a lot of food being brought back to the root system, and everybody is in a rhythmic state of mind. Healthy stems, healthy fruit. Keep flowers on the vine after the plant is 18 to 24 inches. I practice that every year, because once your plant starts growing, you're not going to have to worry about fruit. They'll come. I keep the Epsom salts handy. Probably will not apply it until after the next slide. So, fruit set. This is important to know. Your fruit, the perfect fruit set is when the temperature is 65 to 85 degrees in the daytime and 55 to 65 degrees at night. Fruit will not set when the temperatures are over 90 degrees during the day and 70 at night. Now, your temperature may get up to 90 degrees or even 100, but if you have a cooler evening that goes below 70 degrees, it still will set fruit. Tomatoes are self-pollinators. However, they need a little help. Wind will help them. And if there's no wind, just shake the cage. Bees, especially bumblebees, are good. For some reason, they get all excited when there's vibration. And if there's no bees, get a tuning fork or a battery-operated toothbrush. But make sure there's nobody around when you're doing this. A couple of years ago, my neighbors were laughing at me because I was talking to my tomato plants, and I had a battery-operated toothbrush in my hand, going around and acting like a bee. So be careful with that. So now that we have a healthy plant, these are some of the things that are problems that we're going to try to eliminate. What we're looking at is a verticillium wilt. It's a virus that's in the ground. And this is where I changed my mind when it came to hybrids. This is where in hybrids, if your area is known for verticillium wilt, when you go to your nursery, and I emphasize nursery, you want to look for a code that's on the tag, that's in the plant with a V on it. The wilt disease are caused by fungi in the soil, enters through the young root system, and the fungi then plugs the xylem, which brings water to the plant, preventing the plant from getting water, so it dies. Another one is the fusarium wilt. The code is F1, FF2, FF3, and then it keeps going. They keep cross-pollinating tomato plants, especially if you have one that's very strong against the disease. You know, COVID has enlightened a lot of us about variances. So here we have variances of this disease that could occur. Now, the fusarium and the wilt system is the same. It's a fungi in the soil, and it prevents the xylem from taking water up. But if you look at the picture, you have one that's susceptible and one that's resistant. Okay. And then sometimes when I do put my gardens together, I will put a hybrid next to a heirloom. And I have never had any of these, I'm knocking on wood right now, the Fusarium or the Fusarium wilts in my garden yet. If I do come across it, I probably will solarize that particular bed and rebuild my soil. Tomato canker, okay. It needs moisture to survive. It's spread by spores that become airborne and land on plants. And that's something we can't prevent. You have spores all over your garden, they're all landing on your plants. Remember, we were sanitizing, we took our dead plants out of the garden during the winter. That's important to take that out. It's one of the reasons. You do not want to compost any of the plants that you took out either. We already mentioned that. These cankers grow very slowly, and that often is not noticed until seedlings is transplanted. That's why I transplant 2 to 3 times before I put it in my garden. These cankers will not get onto your plants or will not start what it's doing if it doesn't have water. That's why the splash zone is so important. Your tomato plant is going to be standing out there with all of these spores. As long as water doesn't touch it, it's not going to activate. The previous picture, you saw the green, lush tomato plant. There was no spores on it because of my splash zone. There you go, splash zone. Nematodes, touchy subject. Normally nematodes, you'll find them if you're planting directly in the soil, but it could happen if you introduce it to your raised beds. A nematode is a tiny worm-like creature that you probably can't see with your naked eye. The problem is you have good nematodes, and they're the majority, and they really help break your soil down. And then you have these nematodes that they want to latch on to the root system of your plant and suck it dry. So you can buy a hybrid with the code N that could prevent, for the most part, nematodes. These are little worms, and I already explained that. And what you can do if you want to is add chitin to your soil, even every other year. Do not plant until 2 or 3 weeks after applying into the soil because of ammonia. And of course, it is enriched in nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, high in calcium and magnesium. Now, I don't do this. I don't add chitin to my soil. If I find nematodes in my soil, which I never have, but if I do, I will just, I'll do one of 2 things. I'll either solarize that area and kill them off, or I will, by chance, maybe get some nematodes that will go after these. But if you recall earlier, let me click this here. Remember when we were watering my plants in a 5-gallon bucket and I was throwing it into my garden? I was on a Zoom lunch and learn, I think it was, and the professor was talking about using this method on their peppers grown in the Coachella Valley. What happens is this nematode will lay dormant until it's activated by the temperature. It will also lay dormant until it knows there is a plant for it to go after. So by not knowingly, by adding this water that I used and throwing it back into my garden, it brings the scent of the plant into the soil. So if I had any nematodes, number one, when it got warm, it activated, and then it sensed there was a tomato plant growing. So it wakes up and it starts hitting towards that scent. Now, they only have a limited amount of energy for them to reach that root. And in this case, there's no root for them to find, and they die. So this is something that UCR is working on, and I'm very excited about it. And I think this is something that could really help a lot of our gardeners, especially those that are planting their tomatoes directly into this soil. Blossom end rot. We all have seen this, but before I go on, kind of take a look here and above it. There seems to be some fruit there that looking pretty good, okay? You want to maintain a constant level of moisture, field capacity. You want to apply mulch liberally. You want to prevent calcium deficiency, which we have done that. We've added bone meal to our soil. In cold climates, allow the soil to warm before planting. Cold soil limits nutrient uptake, which is true. This is why I keep my pots in my plants in pots, and I wait till my soil is warm before I plant it. Maintain soil at pH level between 6.5, mine is about 6.5 to 7. Use fertilizers that are low in nitrogen and high in phosphorus, and pick off flowers in the early stages, which we've already done. And here's the fertilizer that I used earlier. So if we follow this procedure, we shouldn't have, and I haven't seen end rot on my tomato plants for years. Growth cankers caused by uneven moisture, again, field capacity. Initially, it happens on the first fruits grown in a dry period, followed by heavy rain or irrigation during ripening. So going back to field capacity, I don't remember having heavy rains, maybe occasionally in the Riverside area, but by maintaining that and making sure that your moisture is right and keeping it at field capacity, you shouldn't have this. But even if you do have it, it's okay. It's still edible. We can't control the day temperatures dropping and rising. So again, even if it does happen, you don't throw the fruit away. And of course, it varies on different types of tomatoes. So let's talk about some of the pests that are in the garden. You'll see there's damage before you see them. And we're talking about the tomato hornworm. You can go out in the garden with your kids or friends or neighbors and have a hornworm party. Take a light out there and you'll probably find them on your bush. If you have them, hopefully you don't. Look for them under or near a fruit set where your fruit is setting and where there's new leaves. The caterpillar comes it becomes a five-spotted moth or sphinx moth. And don't be surprised if when you're digging up in the area and you find this big old moth sitting in your soil, it's getting ready to fly off and be happy and lay eggs on your other critters. Okay, it's recommended that you rotate your crops every 3 years. Don't plant a tomato in the same spot over and over again, because she'll find it and she'll find your plant. she'll lay her eggs, and then they will creep down and lay their nymphs into the ground for them. So what you want to do is rotate your crops about every 3 years. If you don't have time and you think that you have a hornworm, you can go to the store and get BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. It is organic. It is something that when you spray on the leaves, they'll eat the leaves and it'll prevent them from pooping. And when that happens, they get constipated and they fall off. Invite birds into your garden with water fountains. I find that when you have water there, birds will come, and if they're drinking, why not have a snack, and they'll sense the hornworm and they'll go after it. Remember the question on spider mites. Okay, colonize the underside of leaves and sucks plants' juices. They like dusty plants and hot weather. The same family as a spider or tick. Water stress plants are more susceptible. So that might answer part of the question. Anytime your plant is stressing, I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more, but every time when your plant is stressing, it remits an aroma. Healthy plants have a healthy aroma. Plants that are not being cared for will also have its own aroma. Now, many of these pests will go after the aroma that is of a weak plant because they know that their walls, their stems, their leaves are easier to penetrate than those that have a strong aroma. To control it, the only thing that I do, I mean, if I ever seen, and I've seen it one time in my quarantine area where I had spider mites on the plant. And what I did, I always had a cage full of ladybugs, and I stuck it in there, and within 3 days, they're all gone. But the best thing for me to do is if I see it, I would cut it off and destroy it, get it away from my garden. But if it persists, I would just yank the plant out, start all over again, because something's not right, especially if it's stressing. So that's a good thing to know. If it tells you that you have spider mites, maybe you need to revisit your caring of the plant. And they're great hitchhikers. They'll come in your garden through places that you buy your plants from, and you could buy it from the most reputable place, and there's no way of preventing it. Whiteflies, if we do everything that we talked about earlier, you shouldn't have this problem. Disturbing plants will survive. It's not an end changer. Control. Blast with water hose. I don't recommend it on your tomato plant. You can use sticky pads. Beneficial insects. But if you're going to use beneficial insects, make sure you're in control of your ants. Good distance between plants. Perithian, which is a insecticide that's used from chrysanthemums. You can use that. A healthy plant can prevent this. And that's what I talked about aroma. When I went back to our healthy stems, thick stems, they're showing themselves off by casting an aroma out that these bugs will not go to because they know they're tougher to chew. So they're going to go after plants that are not following a good protocol in good nutrition. Things to remember. Irrigate with a soaker hose or drip. Mulch to keep moisture in the ground. Create a splash zone. prevents spores from feeding off of your vine, and that is to keep water off of it. All it takes is a little water to activate those spores. Always clean your tools and sanitize your hands. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. This is the words I live by, and one of my wise statements that I follow. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. We have a few more in here. And one of the questions from Monique, she wants to know, can tomatoes be grown in containers
Sure.
instead of in ground?
Repeat the question, please.
Can tomatoes be grown in containers or
Yes.
pots?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. Tomatoes do well in pots. Where do you live? Where does this person live?
If I'm correct, she lives out here in Moreno Valley.
Okay, yeah, pots are good. The only thing that I recommend that when you grow tomatoes in pots and you're watering it, just like the 5-gallon bucket with all the nutrients flowing out of it, that's what happens when you grow plants in containers. So what you're going to have to do is maybe fertilize more frequently.
Okay. Another question is, this is from Crystal. How do you solarize your soil to kill harmful fungi?
Clear plastic. You cover the soil, and then you want to leave it there for during the heat of the day, and probably leave it there for 3 to 6 months. And then when you take it off, you have to rebuild your soil by adding nutrients to it and slowly building it back up.
Okay. And this one's from Debbie. She has a couple of volunteer plants by her grapefruit trees. She said, should I leave them or dig them up and place them in my raised bed planter? She said, note the squirrels get into the grapefruit tree area.
Okay, so she has volunteer tomato plants by her grapefruit tree. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, 9 times out of 10, that volunteer is probably a cherry tomato. You can try it, but your root system is very delicate. And I think by the time you move it to your raised bed, it's probably not going to make it. And now, is this Deborah Anderson?
No, Debbie Lure.
Oh, Lure. Yeah, Deborah, what I would do is I would just go out. I wouldn't waste my time on that. Leave it alone. Leave it there. It's happy there. Go to the nursery and buy a plant and put it in your raised bed. I would leave it there.
Okay. So another question is from Karen. She said, do plants need shade from strong afternoon sun?
Yes. I think I might have skipped over that. When you create a canopy over your tomato plants, I always have a 30% shade that I cover it during the heat of the day or during the summer, high summer. Yes, that would be a preventative method. What it could do is it could scald your tomato. It doesn't look nice, but it's still edible. But yeah, I would recommend a 30% shade covering, especially during the middle of the summer.
Okay, and this is pretty much just a clarification on the word solarize. And but Laura, I like how you put it there. She put soil orize, which is a whole different word, probably something that we can use in a dictionary later on. But no, when he's talking about solarize, coming from the sun.
Right.
So it would be the SOLARIZE.
Right, coming from the sun.
Next question.
And you want a clear plastic.
Okay. Another question we have is from Crystal. Could you recommend a brand of soaker hose? She said hers didn't work at all.
No, I've never had any problems with soaker hoses. The only difference is you have a thick one and a thin one. I prefer using the thinner model. No particular brand. Buy it from your reputable nursery. they'll take it back if it doesn't work.
So no, that's pretty much it for the questions. A whole lot of good compliments. Actually one more question did show up. So yeah, why clear plastic rather than black plastic when you're doing the solarization part?
Because you don't want to reflect the heat, you want to absorb the heat. Does that
Okay,
make
so-
sense? Black plastic will reflect the heat, whereas your clear plastic will take the heat straight into the ground. That's going to take care of any fungus or nematodes or anything that's in there. It's gonna it's pretty drastic, but it's okay because then you can always learn in rebuilding your soil.
Okay, so do we have any more questions while we have the tomato expert here? Notice wonderful comments for you, Thurman. Many wonderful compliments.
Oh, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that. I haven't given a talk like this in a long time. Normally, I don't give this talk, but I was asked by a special person to do this. Normally, I say no, but in her case, I said yes. And I'm glad I did it. I really am.
Me too.
Well, thank you, everybody. If there's no other questions, I got some more John Denver if you want to hear it.
Hey, sure, why not? And I'll go ahead and put in the closing remarks here. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. And I hope that you learned a whole lot and that you're inspired now to go out here and plant some tomatoes. And that if you have an issue with your tomatoes, now you know what's going on and now you know how you can go ahead and remedy that. And if that doesn't work, you know where you and who you can come to get advice. I did put the websites in there for Coachella Valley, Master Gardener website, and also for the Riverside website. And I did put San Bernardino in there for the questions from the person having to do at Lake Arrowhead. So please look into the chat and see if you can go ahead and pull that information up if you need it. And we hope to see you again in May 8th for our next presentation, pretty much our next workshop and next presentation. And again, very glad that everybody was able to make it and hope that, again, you guys learned a whole lot today and you're excited. I'm always excited. So thank you for coming. Again, does anyone